Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Cleverly Changing podcast. I am your host, Elle Cole from the blog CleverlyChanging.com. The Cleverly Changing podcast is a podcast for homeschool parents, but not just homeschool parents. We also have a podcast that is geared for anybody who wants to supplement their child's education. So we invite you to listen in. Today, I have two guests with me. I have Richard, who is a retired science teacher. He was a high school science teacher, and Charity is one of his former students, and she is an award-winning science student. So I'm going to let them tell you a little bit more about themselves and their love for science. So we're going to start with you, Richard, and then go to Charity.
Thank you so much for having us today. It's really exciting. Basically, I'm originally from Canada. I moved to the United States in my 20s. I have my master's degree in biology. I studied science in Canada, and then when I came here, I decided I wanted to be a science teacher, and it was a great choice for me. I spent 34 years as a science teacher. 4 of those years, I had Charity as my student, and I feel really so lucky that I had her. I also had her sister. I specialized in biology, and also I was very interested in working with students who had a real interest in science research and exploring science beyond sort of the normal curriculum, like really going deeper and having them understand science at a very deep level.
Awesome. So Charity, tell us about yourself and why you started to love science.
Most definitely. So my name is Charity Russell. I'm a current undergraduate student from New York, and as Mr. Kurtz mentioned, I was his student. And he was not only my research teacher throughout my 4 years of high school, he was also one of my greatest mentors and greatest academic supporters. I'm currently attending Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, where I double major in both psychology and education studies, and I'll be graduating this May. Most of my coursework delves into the many psychological facets, as well as just a general exploration of the education system and pedagogical strategies that are available. And I plan to continue my academic pursuit with a graduate degree in psychology and education. And you said why science is important to me, or what drew me to science. It was just, I think it was something that I've always loved since I was younger, but it was a great thanks to my mentors and my parents who really cultivated that interest and saw that interest in me and made sure that I had the tools and resources and support to continue to pursue that.
Okay. Awesome. I think it's so important that we have this conversation right now because science is so important. I remember when I was young, one of my teachers said, science is always changing. And that's really what I love about science. It's not something that's stagnant. There's always something new and something exciting about it. And so I know that you just shared, your experience as a science teacher and you as a science student, but why is science not optional? I think sometimes people look at science as, as one of those classes in school that they take, but not necessarily something that they apply to their lives. So why is science so important, not optional for students?
That's a great question. I think that just from a point of view, from an intellectual point of view and a development as a person, I'm not sure you could really exist as a whole person in our present society without a good background in science. We're not saying you have to be a scientist, but you have to be a good citizen to understand your world. Because if you read the newspaper now, it's just so filled with things related to science. You got this huge hurricane that's coming up. You have all kinds of issues with the environment, global warming, computer science, computer fraud. These are all things that are challenges to everyone. So if you don't understand that or can't read a newspaper or read an article or something online and understand that, it's like you're missing part of being a modern person, like to understand what's going on. I think that's important for anybody's development. And also from a totally practical point of view, I went on the computer the other day and I typed to Google for this show, what are the top paying jobs, let's say the top 15 top paying jobs in our society. And almost every single one was connected in some way to the ability to know science. So you had medicine, you had computer science, engineering, technical kinds of jobs. So if I'm a parent and I'm thinking, well, I want my child to have a rich life and have the funds that they would need to do well in life, if you can choose, you should choose, if you have that interest, something with respect to science, because all kinds of opportunities are there. And it changes all the time, just as you were saying. There's the jobs that are now here, like most jobs that are going to be there for your children don't even exist yet. So you need to have that kind of skills to be ready for those kinds of challenges that are going to come up.
Before you answer that question, Charity, I just want to bring something up that you just mentioned. I love that you talked about the jobs of the future, because right now, many of our schools, probably 99.9, if not 100%, are pushing STEM, which is science, math, science, technology, engineering, and math. And they're doing that because of the job prospects for the future. So it's not something that our kids can just overlook, because it is that important for their future if they want to have a career that is lucrative.
Most definitely. And I think Mr. Kurtz discussed the practical reasons so wonderfully. And I think I can speak a little bit to more of my personal experience just as a student and a recent high school student. In my experience, science and science research not only opened doors for me, but also equipped me with the tools that I deem are integral to success in many different areas outside of science. So with our world constantly evolving and, as we discussed, this increasing prevalence of these high-paid professions in science and technology, or dealing with science and technology in some way, I just find that learning and developing an interest in the field is an important skill to foster if it's there in the student. And in my personal experience, I developed, as I said, an interest for science at a very young age, but this later developed into a passion for research. And unlike, other subjects, my involvement for science, or my interest in science, equipped me with these tools in problem solving, mental endurance, communication, and so many others. And they've all been transferable to my pursuit of higher education and beyond. Because of involvement in research, it provides students with the skills to design and execute different experiments, or learn dedication and drive. Oftentimes in my experience, I had to stay after school until 5 or 6 p.m. and then go to school early. But this was all because I did it out of love for the discipline. But it also teaches time management, because in order to dedicate all the time to science and research, if that's what the student chooses to do, it's important to balance the other subjects as well. It teaches innovation and creativity. By nature, oftentimes with science, things don't go as planned on the first try. You have to go through this type of procedural reinvention and be comfortable to find a different pathway to reach a desired end product, and that teaches perseverance. And I just think a huge benefit of my involvement in sciences has also shown in my communication skills, my ability to, take a summary or, recapitulate what my ideas into a coherent form. And this is an important skill that helped me personally with the college application process and pursuing the continuation of my education, or public speaking. So beyond, academic skills, which there are so many academic skills that I think that science helps to foster, there are also other things, like, for example, it opened doors for travel. My senior year, I was able to qualify at the state level, and then further at the international level to present my research at the International Science and Engineering Fair, which happened to be in Los Angeles. So this was the first time I was really able to branch out and travel independently and meet students from all over the world that shared this love for science. And I think that that's important for as many students or students who are interested to gain that exposure to other fields of science, to other individuals and how they learn and how they acquire their information. I've also seen an impact from science from my peers. I find that those who have graduated from undergrad with degrees in science professions have had an easier time getting postgraduate job positions, or I guess a little bit closer to home with my sister, for example. She also, as Mr. Kurtz discussed, researched under his mentorship and went to pursue an undergraduate education in neuroscience and psychology, then did research at the National Drug Institute, and is now starting her first year of medical school at Harvard. So I mention all of this to say that science equips the student with not only curricular knowledge, but also has the possibility to open the doors for additional opportunities and skills.
So as a parent, I am a homeschool mom of twin girls, and I find that science is so exciting. So when we get together and do experiments, it just really, I see their eyes light up like, what's going to happen next? And I think so many parents are really entering that whole arena of homeschooling, or they're remote schooling their child at home. And so they have to have more of a hands-on uh, sort of experience with their child's education. And so there will be more parents who are encouraging their students, their children, to do experiments at home. So how can parents, what are some tips for parents to make science exciting at home? Because science really is exciting. And I know it definitely, I find joy when I see how the experience work out. So what, as a, people who have professions in science, what are some tips for parents to make it exciting for their kids?
Well, first of all, I think they need to be all like you, because you just have this enthusiasm when it comes to this whole thing. I mean, it's almost like if the parent is enthusiastic about what they're doing, the children will it will catch fire in the young person that they're dealing with. I think sometimes a lot of parents are afraid, like they're a little bit scared about it because they remember maybe they didn't take science in college, or maybe in high school they were really afraid of it. But there's nothing to be afraid of. And I think that you want to direct your child, but you don't want to direct them. In other words, you've got to make sure that what they're trying to do is safe and, within their grasp, but you don't want to like stifle them. So one of the things you'll find if you go on the internet, and I have supplied you with that long list of various kinds of activities. One of the sections activities are science experiments that you can do with your child at home using everyday material that is not like outrageously expensive or anything like that. The point being is that if the child has that opportunity to mess around, it's really important. You don't necessarily want like to do a cookie cutter type thing. What I mean by is like they'll have an experiment, like put some baking soda and vinegar together and you make a volcano. Okay, that's like the classic thing. I mean, that's a demonstration. It's not really science. So you have to discover what will work for you, and you have to let your kids tinker, make mistakes, do silly things with their experiments to kind of learn it on their own. I also saw this website that I also included, like let your child take apart an old like appliance and just let them look at it. And because of the internet, it makes it so viable for them to be able to like, look at what a transistor might be, or what a computer chip might look like, and try and break things down. But I feel like it's just being excited about it, showing your children opportunities. There are so many things you can do that are not necessarily like complicated, but as long as they get the idea of what science is, the basics, that's an amazing start. And on that sheet, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I love that you mentioned let your kids make mistakes, because sometimes as parents, learning is always about perfection. And we're like, oh, we want them to get it right. We want them to do it perfectly. But that's not really what learning is all about. Just like you mentioned, let your kids tinker, let them make mistakes.
Yeah, because here's the thing. A lot of times, I'll hear students say, and Charity remembers this probably when she was in ninth grade or so, oh, it didn't work out. Like it wasn't supposed to, that wasn't what it said it was supposed to be. So as a parent, you don't want to say that to your kid. You want to say, well, let's figure out why it didn't work, or let's do something else to make it work in the way you thought it would work, as opposed to saying, well, you didn't do it right, or, because in science, as Charity knows, like there is no right answer. There is a right answer eventually, but there is a long pathway to that right answer. It's a lot of work that, if you have a textbook, which is something very static and gets obsolete really fast in science, especially, they don't tell you the years of hardship and work that it took to get to that point of an understanding. So I think that it makes it very difficult to, you have to be free let your kids be free and safe. That's the thing I would suggest.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess to piggyback off of what Mr. Kurtz has mentioned, and while I can't necessarily speak towards the parenting aspect, I could share with you some tools or tips that my parents used for me as a child to help through this excitement I had for science. And like Mr. Kurtz said, I do think that there is this misconception that students whose parents aren't involved in sciences are going to have a harder time with it, but I definitely feel that that's not the case. I think that as long as there is an engagement, that it can be extremely fruitful. Neither of my parents were involved in the sciences, yet they did a bunch of things that kind of made me more excited about it. So once they noticed that I had this keen interest in the field at a young age, from there I kind of just built off of my exposure. So when I was around 6 or 7 years old, my parents purchased a very rudimentary light microscope. And that was so exciting for me. It was the greatest Christmas present. And I was able to look at different specimen under the microscope, and then go in my backyard and take other specimen and make my own microscope slides, and things like that were really awesome for me as a visual learner, as a hands-on learner. It was great to kind of do those things on my own. Another thing beyond this, they would enroll me in science summer camps in which I was able to participate in experiments and meet new people outside of meet other students outside of my already small friend group at the time, and then take family trips to science fairs or borrow books from the library about science. Using the internet is just a huge resource that we all have available to us these days. Just you have to create or complete experiments at home. And I think that there's just endless opportunities for students to engage in the home, but I think from an educational or pedagogical standpoint, it's really important to take a look at the learning style of the student, because I think that, and cater those different activities based on the learning style. So, a hands-on learner, like I said, may love the home experiments, may love, creating that volcano or growing those seeds. But an auditory learner might prefer to watch a science video, like Bill Nye the Science Guy, or watch a movie on the sciences. Or a reading and writing learner might prefer reading books on the discipline, and so on. So in short, there's a number of things that could be done, and there are a lot of resources to tap into, but I think it's important to kind of cater those resources and cater what activities you choose to kind of expose your child to based on their learning styles.
Yes, yes. So it makes me so excited. Obviously, this is something that I love. I love talking about education, and what you just mentioned about learning styles. So many kids are kinesthetic learners. That is the children who are interested in hands-on learning. And sometimes I think schools are doing better at hands-on learning than when I was in school. It's gotten a lot better. And so I think that for parents, you talked about your parents giving you a science kit. It's giving kids an opportunity to touch science, to feel it. I know with my kids, we live in the DC area, and there are so many museums. I love going to museums, and we could just go to the National History and Science Museum and just see so much. And it wasn't just science experiments or beautiful rocks or different things. It was also photography at times because it's just like science just encompasses so many different things. And it's like looking at it through many different lenses. That's why I like taking them to museums to give them an opportunity to learn in other places, not just doing hands-on experiments at home, but it's, it's even, you talked about growing seeds, like going in your backyard, seeing what happens. It's about talking about, hey, yeah, something on the car has become rusty. Why did that happen? It's really creating a space and an avenue to have conversations about what is going on. And you talked about that a little bit earlier. And so I think that for parents, it's just, creating a space where they're not afraid to look up things with their kids. A part of being a parent who supplements education is being willing to learn alongside your kid, and I think what you just mentioned is just important for parents to kind of take to heart and open themselves up for. So next, I wanted to kind of talk about, you mentioned that you gave me a resource. Everyone, I will be sharing a resource on my blog with a list of science materials and sites that parents can go to that will help supplement science education. So thank you for providing that, Richard. And I'm going to put it on the site so that people can download it and can kind of, get that information so that they can interact with it. So I know that some parents are afraid of science because they don't want to, want something to explode. Where are, what are some science experiments that parents can do at home? You mentioned the volcano, which I definitely have done that at home with my kids. You're saying, it's a demonstration, but what are some real experiments that families can do?
So basically, I being a science teacher, I have to show you one, right? So I set up a little experiment here beside me, and the thing I want you to notice, and I'll turn my computer over in a second. There's nothing intricately complicated about doing what I'm just about to do. You can get it, and you can get all the material at a grocery store. You can order the seeds from like a catalog or buy them at a store. And the thing is, you want to keep it simple, and the way that you approach it really depends on the age of the child. So I'm going to just show you a setup, and I think everyone could do this as soon as they want because it's so easy. So let me just turn my computer. I don't know if you can see that.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so all this does is I need some vinegar. I have a bunch of radish seeds here. I have some cups, and I have some bags. And inside the bags are radish seeds that are laying across, as you can see, that are laying across in the bag on some paper towel. That's it. You don't need anything else. So how do you approach it? You might say to your child, I have some radish seeds. I want you to, let's design an experiment together using radish seeds. Like absolutely giving them very little direction, letting them think of what they could do with a bag, with some water, with some vinegar, whatever. Or you might pose the question, I wonder how radish seeds germinate with respect to how acidic the environment is. So I have my acid, right, which is my vinegar. So what I did was very simple. I took 3 cups. 1 cup I put no vinegar in. 1 cup had 15 drops, and 1 had 30 drops in it. So the child is beginning to learn about experimentation because you need a control, right? So you talk about the control being no vinegar at all. And basically I soak the seeds overnight, and then in the various solutions, and then I put them in the bag and I wait a couple of days. And what happens is the seeds will start to germinate. I'm not sure if you can see them, but these are germinating seeds in the bag. So they're germinating seeds in the bag.
We can see them.
And you can actually do it's hard to see this, but I can see a stark difference between the control, the 15 and the 30. Like right away, I could take a picture of that. I can document what I did. I can measure the seeds. It's really cool because if you remember what those look like, if you look at the 30 drop stuff, you could see that they did germinate, some didn't, and you can see that there's a lot less growth. So it'd be really cool for the child to then say, I wonder if I put 10 drops of vinegar in, or what happens if I use another substance? Or you could just imagine, what happens if I shine a light on them of a different color? What happens if I put it in the refrigerator? Like, you have a basic design here. Put radish seeds on a paper, soak them in water, and put them in a bag. But now the child can come up with tons of things to do with that. That could be like a model for a huge number of experiments that you could expand on. So in the resources I gave you, I have a section on doing on experiments that were hands-on. I don't know, there's probably hundreds of them. So you don't necessarily want to go picking out and looking for hundreds of different experiments. As a parent, you don't have that much time. So you might want to pick a model. Let's say our model in my house, we're going to do the seed model. And then from that, you could just go into all kinds of areas. Your child might say, what happens? Does a bean seed behave in the same way as this seed? What happens if I plant a seed that was in vinegar? What happens if I water the plant? So this is certainly not really like ultra sophisticated science in terms of like the material, but the concepts are very sophisticated because it doesn't matter. You could be doing the research that Charity is. You still need a control and experiment. So you need to learn the language of the science experiments. And so I just wanted to show you a very simple thing that you can do. And there's hundreds of other things that are possible. But again, it's let your child play. I mean, they're not going to hurt themselves with vinegar. And, all this stuff is safe, no explosions, so that's okay. I think some parents think that's going to happen, but if you sort of control the material, you'll control the safety in the house. And I feel you can do so many cool things.
Yes, you just mentioned something that I think is so important, and you mentioned the word documentation. And I think that parents can give their kids a little notebook or something to document every step of the way. And I think that's kind of key. That's what kind of separates just the observer for
Right.
someone who is doing more and really learning,
So
because they're able to compare.
at the beginning of the school year, no matter what year, what age, the first thing, and Charity remembers this, the first thing is we get the kids to set up a logbook. So they have to document everything they do, like the date. And this is a great thing for a young person who has to learn discipline and, recording what you do. And if a child really develops a great project, if they end up going to some kind of science fair, you definitely need a book, a lab book. So we just give our students just use the marble notebook. You don't need anything fancy. And you just write your results in there. So when it's like their little diary of science. So that's a great point.
Yes. So what you just mentioned, put the date. What else would someone put inside the logbook?
So usually what we have on the front, we have like an index, right? So we say like page number, this is what we did that day on that experiment. You would put down your impressions, your results. Like if you're designing an experiment, let's say the seed one, you'd want to write down what you were thinking, what your design was, what the control is. You also want to put down, the data. I love making nice, beautiful ones. You could take a photo if you have a digital camera and you could print out an example, any measurements, any ideas. It doesn't have to be neat or beautiful. It's always cool to have like a vinegar stain on your paper because that means you're really like doing your work, right? So I feel like you want to just document everything that you do. It's important. And Charity knows, like when you go to a science fair, like the judges will look at your logbook for sure to make sure, everything you say that you did, you actually documented it and did it. So, And online, there's tons of resources. If you just look up, how to keep a logbook, it will have a lot of details and examples. I have lots of examples, but it's just a diary, basically, of your science experiences for everything that you do related to science. If you watch it, like if you have a student, like your child says, I wonder what, if I go online and start saying seeds and acid. So if you're doing like keyword searches, we always tell our students to write down like the URL or the website that they visited, and if there's anything there that they learned.
Awesome. Awesome. That's a lot of great information that parents can utilize and implement. So, Charity, I have a question for you. So, Richard shared a lot of resources with us, and I'm definitely going to put those on the blog. Do you remember having any favorite resources or books that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I would say that for the most part, I really used the internet, and that was kind of my go-to. From there, like I would try to see what resources I can start with there, and then just kind of blind search, just type in cool science experiments. That's what it started as, like at a young age. But then once I developed my interest, so in high school, I had a really strong interest in like fruit flies and planarian animal sciences. So I took books out on the library on anatomy of a flatworm, or anatomy of a fruit fly and things of the sort, and kind of just like dove into those books and tried to get as much information around that. Now I'm doing more research around women of color and their involvement in advocacy, or literature research. Those are the two fields that I'm really interested in right now. And I kind of, first step is to go to the internet and I use the resource Google Scholar, which is kind of, I would think is a better resource for high school students, to kind of get a good scholarly article and get a good understanding of it, which is where I start with like my literature review, which is another important, I think, practice to get into from a young age, is first learning, why am I doing the experiment? Why is this interesting? Like, what is the background information? What is already readily known, and what can I learn from it from there? So for me, I would say definitely the internet, and trying to use the internet to find literature that way.
Can I just say one other thing? One thing that the internet has really broken down the walls is, and Charity is a good example of this, is getting mentorships outside, like professional people, like in laboratories, in both in university, academia, and also government. I'm continually amazed by the availability of scientists to kids. So we have all the time, our students, through the adult, are getting mentorships and getting connections with labs. So for example, if someone's doing an experiment, let's say with the seeds, and their child is really learning and getting excited and motivated, I would start going online and looking for researchers working with seed germination. And then you can always find people's email, and you'd be surprised how willing these people are to interact with you and your child directly. I'm saying, like one of the scientists who was at Temple University that Charity was working with, he actually came to visit us at our high school. So you get these people that are like, scientists are really passionate, right? And if they see like a little, like a child interested in their field, and they get an email from a parent of that child, you'd be surprised how great it is that they would answer your questions or talk to you about it. So don't underestimate the power of the internet for finding mentorships, and like kind of like we call them cyber mentors. So you can find people. Now, you won't always get a positive response, and you won't always get a response, but if you are dedicated to finding one, you will get someone out there that's going to help you. And we've had people from all over the world, like England and Europe, all over the world, and South America, who have actually contacted our students just because we did these emails that showed the person getting the email that we weren't playing around, that we were very prepared. We really did our homework before. You don't want to email a scientist and say, hey, my daughter wants to do an experiment on seeds. That ain't going to work, because they're going to say, this kid wants me to do all the work. But they will answer you if you said, I've done an experiment and I found this out and I'm really curious about this and I see what you do. Can you help me understand this or continue upgrading my experiment?
That is a great tip for us, because I didn't know that scientists were so accessible. I know that for my kids, we live in an area not far from NASA. So I've taken them there. And, like when you go and visit, you can do a tour and things like that. So I thought, just going there. And now with the pandemic, it's a little less accessible because you can't, places just aren't open like that anymore. So knowing that there is this cyber mentorship that exists, I know for me, that is so encouraging under these times where we can't be out and about like normal. And in my area, we have tons of nature centers. And a lot of times at the nature center, there are researchers. And so we've often, come face to face and been able to ask questions by visiting a nature center. So I just encourage parents, just like you mentioned, to seek out your resources, let people know what you're doing and see how, you can further that knowledge and ask questions. When people go to my site, after this, I will put a link to a post that has the resources that you provided. It is links for students and parents, virtual field trips, and online activities. And I just want to thank you for compiling that, because
No problem.
I think that when it comes to science, it is a joy that starts when you're young. If you can tap into that while you're little, it can grow. And I know that as a Black female, sometimes the numbers don't show that we continue in science, but I think there is that desire and that joy. Sometimes we don't know what to do with that. And just having this conversation encourages us to think outside of the box and further that, further our skill set, further, our knowledge. And, it's something that I wish I had really furthered when I was younger, because I was excited. It's this excitement that I have as a parent. It's not new. It has always existed. And so I think that we have to tap into that and not lose it. And so I thank you both for joining our conversation and being on my podcast today. I just, is there anything else that you want to share before we close?
I'll just say something and then Charity, I'm sure she'll say something. Just remember, let your child pursue their passion and just share it with them. And I think that that's the key. And there's so much out there and so many resources. I mean, I think my email is on that list. So if you want to email me, if you have any specific questions, not a problem. You can do that for sure.
Well, thank you for making yourself available, and everybody go to CleverlyChanging.com so that you can get this resource. All right, Charity.
And I'm also more than happy to share my email address with you all to answer any questions or further discuss anything, honestly. And to close, I would really like to just emphasize the importance that involvement of science has had on my personal journey, and that I think can have for any student, both academically and otherwise. I think oftentimes, like you were mentioning, it's easy for children, especially children of color, to be discouraged from pursuing the discipline, because we're not as frequently represented in the field all the time. But it's important that with the support of parents and mentors, that they push against those stereotypes and the uncertainty and dive deeper into the sciences. And I've definitely experienced my fair share of doubts and uncertainty, but the skills that I have learned as a science student and as a researcher, and just through being, inquisitive, has taught me to persevere through that, and not only to succeed, but to enjoy my academic journey while I'm at it. So thank you again also for having us.
All right. That's
just
so
one last
encouraging.
thing.
Yes.
You see, if you're a science person and you have that experience from being very young, you're going to have a child like Charity. So I could just say that, how wonderful it is. She is a wonderful person, and you can see part of her journey. Of course, she has an amazing family and so on, but I think that science, you could see her confidence. She's not that old of a person. She has an amazing, grasp of vocabulary and presentation. And it's been a really great thing to see her grow up and be like what she is now. I'm so amazed and really blessed.
Oh, that's just beautiful to be able to still connect with a teacher who is still encouraging, even after you graduate. So it's just been a joy to talk
Thank
with
you.
both of you. Everyone, if you are online right now, I'm going to give you 1 minute. If you have a question, please put your question in the comments section and we will answer it. So I'm going to give you 1 minute and then we are going to close out. But in that 1 minute, I just wanted to say I have twin daughters. They are 11 now and they have always loved science. And I think just seeing, going out in nature, they love being outdoors and they love seeing, little tadpoles and things like that. And I think for me, it's like I get to tap into that kid side of my life once again. And so it does make me excited, even though it's hot and sticky outside. It's like, oh, I love this. And so I think that as as parents, it's like sometimes you have to, take off your work hat. And sometimes you gotta, just kind of relax and explore. Life is about adventure, life is about exploration. And so that is the beauty of being a kid. They are so open and willing to explore and just see what isn't so apparent. They're not looking at something with an automatic just mindset of what is going to happen. They're just open. And I think that is what I love about being able to be home with my kids and see that, because I get to tap into my imagination and that side of me that is curious. That was one word that was a common thread throughout this conversation. Explore your curiosity. Let your kids learn. Let them see what is just kind of beyond the apparent. So I appreciate this conversation and I thank you for the resources and for sharing your personal views and your experiences. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Appreciate it.
having us.
All right. Well, that's all, folks. Remember to go to CleverlyChanging.com. You can also subscribe to our podcast. It is on most platforms where podcasts are played. That includes Spotify, Stitcher, iHome Radio, Pandora. We're almost everywhere. So definitely subscribe and leave a review. And if you have a guest that you want to be on the podcast, please leave a comment in the comment section. I will continually monitor the comments. If you are watching the replay of this episode, leave the word replay in the comment section so we'll know that you watched. So thank you all, and I wish you a wonderful week. All right. Bye
Thank
now.
you. Bye.